All right, so this is lines 23 to 33 of the first book of the Aeneid. If you were to start and look at this first line in isolation, you might be somewhat confused about what id refers to, but if you look back at the previous two lines, you'll see that id refers to the things which Juno had heard about Aeneas and the Trojans, founding a race that would rule over many and mean destruction for Libya. Here, Libya is used somewhat loosely to refer specifically to Carthage. Okay, so notice id metuanes, you have a present active participle, you have a direct object for it, and then continuing on with the same subject, which is Saturnia. Here she's referred to as Saturnia because she is the daughter of Saturn. So this is still Juno. I know she's described as Memor. This is the second time in the poem so far that we've had some reference to Juno's mindfulness or remembering. You may remember yourself that the previous one was the Memorem Iram described in, I don't remember which line, but I'm sure you can see it if you've got the full text with you. And she's mindful of the Veteris Belli, the Old War, which I'm sure you realize, especially from the next line, is the Trojan War. All right, here what you need to watch out for is the relative pronoun right here, but the use of prima here, which would otherwise perhaps go right there. What you want here is quod which she first, right? Geserat had waged, etc., etc. For Argis here, the Argives, these are the Greeks. Virgil here is mimicking a feature of Homer, according to which Homer never referred to the Greeks as Greeks, or even by one name. He had several, like the Danaoi. Sometimes he would talk himself about the Argives, but never Greeks as a whole, or Hellenes as they would call themselves. All right, moving on, you'll notice that this nectum is explanatory. So nectum etiam, and even still, and you're going to want to have some negation here. Yet even still, the causai irarum saevique dolores, the causes of her angers and her savage pains, had not yet fallen from her mind or spirit here. Pay attention to the irarum and dolores here. You might remember that ira was mentioned before, and then dolor is going to be etymologically related to dolens in the indirect question you had earlier with quidve dolens. Here with mane altamente repostum, notice altamente, adjective with the noun. Repostum, this is short for repositum from repono, reponere. And then judicium is going to be your subject. The judicium qualified by paridis, the judgment of Paris, and the spretaeque injuria formae. This, of course, I'm sure you realize, refers to the judgment of Paris, in which, to use their Roman names, Venus, Minerva, and Juno descended to Paris, who was shepherding his flocks near Mount Ida, and submitted the question regarding who was the most beautiful to him. They also, in addition to disrobing and asking his opinion about what he saw, they also offered substantial bribes to him. And you may know that Helen was offered to Paris in exchange for picking Aphrodite or Venus. Okay, so Juno was not happy about Paris's decision. Paris was a Trojan prince, and Juno bears the Trojans some grudge for that. The genus in visum, of course, is still referring to the Trojans, and then et rapti Ganymedis honores. There's two ways you can take this. You can either use rapti as a genitive singular modifying Ganymedis of snatched Ganymede, or alternatively, the rapti honores, the stolen honors of Ganymede. I think, even though there's some ambiguity in the grammar of the text, I think that the much more natural reading is the honores of snatched Ganymede. You may remember that Ganymede was himself a Trojan. He was the brother of Priam. Zeus fell in love with him and actually came down to him in the form of an eagle, abducted him, and made him the cupbearer of the gods. This particular sculpture makes it look like it was actually quite the romance which they had, and then you'll notice right here that Ganymede is indeed bearing that cup. But he becomes the cupbearer more generally in Olympus. But Juno is faced with that injury every day. You may realize that Juno's not pleased about Zeus bringing a boy toy of sorts to Olympus for his personal pleasure. All right, so then you have akensa. This is your perfect passive participle from akendo, akendere, to light on fire, and then super is or super, sorry, is going to be superhis in addition to these, right? Then you have yaktatos aikoretoto. Notice again the perfect passive use of yaktatos, whereas earlier you had Aeneas referred to as yaktatus et alto, having been tossed around on land and sea. Here you have yaktatos in the plural, referring to the Trojans, right? And then aikoretoto, I think this is fairly clear, ablative of place where. Okay, and reliquias here is used in apposition to the Trojans, right? These are the reliquias. Danaum, here you have one of those syncopated genitive plurals where you would expect danaorum, right? So the remains of the Danaans, atquimitis Achille, right? And of unsoft or ungentle Achilles. Achilles is so referred to here not only because he was such a savage warrior, but perhaps also because Virgil has in mind the vengeance which Achilles exacted upon Hector's corpse. This is a black figure vase painting showing Achilles having yoked or having tied Hector's corpse to the back of his chariot, driving it around to deface the body. Okay, so she was doing what with these? She was arkebat, staving them off or keeping them off, longe for Latio, from Latium, and of course, all of this describes the Trojans themselves. Then right here at this point, you have something of an abrupt subject change. You might note that up until this point, Juno was the subject, as indicated by the third person singular ending arkebat, but then you'll notice here that you have erabant. This means that these people who were the direct object in the previous sentence are now the subject, right? Here you have your accusative of duration of time, which I think is fairly straightforward. Acti fatis, acti is maybe not entirely clear. What you have here is the direct object, the troas, right? These were then changed into the nominative with this general shift in grammar. So they were acti, driven, fatis. And make a note of this. You might remember that Aeneas is described as fato profugus. You may also remember the phrase si qua fata sinant, if the fates would allow it all. Fate plays a very central role throughout the poem. And then they were thrown about and compelled by fates, Maria omnia circum. Here, this is the reversal of prose order, where you would have circum, around, Maria omnia. And then finally, Virgil ends with one of these exclamations, tantae modus erat Romanam condragentem. What you have in this is a genitive with the form of esse, meaning it was of such mass or of such such a great load, perhaps, to condere Romanam gentem. All right, I'm going to try to end it there, keep it short. Talk to me in class if any of this video wasn't clear, as I'm sure it was not.